the role that insurance is playing in society, and it's what allows people to take risks, to recover from setbacks. It's also what allows them to build generational wealth, right? Because they're always going to be bumping the roads, and insurance is what protects people.
Wait, so you're telling me that there's insurance out there that exists at a micro level for people doing a one-day adventure?
Yes. Why insurance started was at the beginning that, people in a village would come together and, if someone's house would burn down, everybody would pitch in to help that person, rebuild the house.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newest episode of the LUNATIC CEO podcast. Today we have Theresa Blissing. How do you say your name?
Blissing, yeah.
Blissing, Theresa Blissing with us. Wunderbar. She is German, so we've been able to connect on our grassroots. She's an amazing person. There's so much to unpack with Theresa, and I'm just very, very excited to have you on our podcast and to talk to you more about your experience and how it's been being a woman entrepreneur in a very technical space, having to carry a CEO mindset. So with that being said, thank you for being on the show, Theresa.
Well, thank you, Rudi, so much for having me. Really excited to be here. I know we talked a few months ago about, you having the idea of starting this podcast. So exciting that you have done it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. You were very inspirational, actually. You and another man, James, who has the InsurTech Geek podcast. And then we've actually gone all in on producing content just to try and add value altogether. So with that said, I want you to kind of share with us your founding story. So you have some podcasts of your own, one of which was started in Asia, InsurTech Amplified out in Asia. And so you've been instrumental in developing the insurance space out there. And then also you're bringing this to the US. So you recently launched InsurTech Amplified in the US. Talk to us about founding those two different businesses. What would you even call them, being that they're podcasts in and of their own?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, the first podcast I started was or is called the Asia InsurTech podcast. I was living in Bangkok at that time. It's 2018, end of 2018. I met this guy, American Michael Waits, who has spent, I think, close to 3 decades now in Asia Pacific. He worked for Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley in Japan, and then moved also to Bangkok. And he had this podcast called the Asia Tech Podcast. And that was a time where podcast was fairly new in Asia. You already had some major shows in the US and also in Europe, but for Asia, it was still quite a new medium. And he actually asked me to join him on the Asia Tech podcast and talk a bit about all the things I was doing in InsurTech in Asia. And that's when I realized that is actually a great way to give a platform for all these amazing, entrepreneurs, but also thought leaders in this space.
Right.
There was, at the time, there was a lot of hype around, all the lemonades and bought by many from the US and from Europe, but there was very little coverage and content on all the amazing things that were happening in Asia. And, Asia, and especially when you're talking about developing Asia, it needs its own solutions. Like, you can't take a concept that works in the mature market like Germany, like the US, and, apply it to a country like India, like Indonesia. Right. This is how we got together and decided to start the Asia InsurTech podcast. And we started in 2019. So we are one of the longest running shows in that space, and are really focusing on how technology is reshaping the insurance industry in Asia. And has been a great journey. And at the beginning, because you were asking, is it a business? What was the idea behind it? And at that point, it was, once I saw the need, but it was also for me working as a, independent advisor, consultant. I did a lot of research projects on innovation, on InsurTech in Asia. I worked with regulators, etc. And it was a good way for me to also get my profile out, but also to build that network with entrepreneurs, with people in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, fast forward, today we are building shows for insurance companies, including American companies like Chubb, who have now their own show that is produced by Michael and the team. And when I relocated to New York last year, we decided, okay, let's add another global show, and that is now InsurTech Amplified. And yeah, it has been a great journey. We met so many amazing people in the industry and built that like network. And yeah, it has been more than great. And that's also, you know, how we are connecting here today.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I'm excited to be, you know, talking to you more, especially about your US show and the impact that it's having, because it's so unique to see somebody think globally in terms of taking an industry, taking their insights over to a different country where it's completely different. I prefaced my next question with how I really got inspired to do more insurance. There was a founding story to my journey, but when it came to like business and trying to be disruptive, I read an article while in Ethiopia about the impact of auto insurance on the Ethiopian GDP. And it completely transformed the entire country, because now John, who's trying to get to work and gets in a car accident, loses his car and loses his job and has to walk home, can now receive indemnification, can have his car fixed, he keeps his job, and he can go back to work the next day. And so the production of the entire country increased dramatically within a 12-month span, simply because of implementing auto insurance, which then segued me into like, why is auto insurance so important? Why do we require it federally? It's a building block to a modern society. You need, how are we going to take care of the sick? So hospitals and healthcare. You need to know, what are we going to do with the garbage and the waste to keep people from getting sick and diseases and viruses? And insurance. You need a few other things too, but it's one of the building blocks. So with that being said, how is Asia different? Talk to me about how insurance and auto insurance, home insurance is different in Asia. Where are they compared to the US? Like, draw the parallels for us.
Yeah, no, and you know, you said something really important there, right? The role that insurance is playing in, you know, society, and it's what allows people to take risks, to, you know, recover from setbacks. It's also what allows them to build generational wealth, right? Because they're always going to be bump in the roads, and insurance is what protects people. So now when it comes to Asia, and it's, you know, I don't want to generalize Asia. It's a, you know, vastly large continent with very different cultures, right? So if you look
maybe we
alone
focus
at,
on like Southeast Asia. You've done a lot of work, right? Okay. So, and then,
I did
then
a
I
lot
guess
of
maybe
work in Southeast Asia.
So the difference then between Asia in general, you know, which includes China and Hong Kong and Vietnam, and then you move into Southeast Asia, right, where you have Indonesia and stuff. Maybe explain that piece. And then I'm just so curious about how you're doing what you're doing over there.
Yeah, you know, and again, even if you look at South,
I spent a lot of time in Thailand, which is predominantly a Buddhist country. Thailand, compared to some of its neighbors, actually has an aging population. So again, you know, all these factors have an impact on insurance, on the type of products you need, etc. If you're then looking at Indonesia, which is, you know, predominantly a Muslim country, that has an impact on how insurance products are structured, because they have to follow Sharia law, right?
Ooh, interesting.
And also,
never thought about that.
Yeah.
Never thought about that. Wow.
So, you know, again, an example, you can't just take one product that works in one market and, you know, plug it into another market. Then also Indonesia, in terms of population, is very different. You have 50% of the population is below the age of 30. So while Thailand has an aging population, Indonesia is very useful, very young. You know, you have a lot of people who grew up as digital natives, right? At the same time, Indonesia, while still, you know, considered a, you know, developing country, is very digitized and mobile first, right? And that's another difference, that especially when you compare to like Germany or the US, right? If I ask you, like, how did you first access the internet? You're going to say, like, through a computer. And, when you think about the internet, you think about a website. You think about, how you first experienced it and, how you.
I think about search. The ability to search and answer any question. It's a resource. That's how I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But you think about it in terms of your laptop or a computer, right?
Oh, yeah. I think about it through the device, my cell phone mainly. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's also, a lot of people in, Indonesia or, India is the same. They first started accessing the internet for the first time through their mobile phone. And so user journeys and the way our products are sold and, serviced is often different because it has a mobile first approach. Like in the US and in Germany, I often find companies that try to convert a desktop website into like a mobile application, and it's clunky. It's just a different user journey. Whereas, in countries like Indonesia, people start thinking first from a mobile approach, because also a lot of people, they just don't have a laptop or they don't have a computer.
Sure.
Especially like the lower income groups, right? So everything is designed to be, able to do on your phone. And that's also a reason why I believe the US should pay close attention to what is happening, in these countries, because when it comes to that, they leapfrog that, desktop era and jump straight into, a mobile first approach. And, you mentioned car insurance. Like Indonesia is one of the very few countries in the world where motor insurance is still not mandatory. So you can have a car or a motorbike, and you don't even need third-party liability. And again, this has an impact also on the financial literacy of the population. Like you and I, we probably learned a little bit from our parents how insurance works. Or, first when we bought a car, that's the first time we get in touch with insurance and we learn about how insurance works and, why it's important. If you don't have that component, that has an impact on the financial literacy and how people understand financial products. And again, that makes it more complicated to sell people insurance that, have never heard of the concept before. Like imagine I come to you and say like, hey, if something goes wrong, you have an accident, you get sick, your mother dies, I have a product for you. People will be like, wow, that's a scam. And, then also culture comes in and superstition comes in. So it's a much harder sell for people who have, not the knowledge about such products. So some of the companies, and I also wrote a book about some of the amazing companies I've come across in Asia and how they make insurance more accessible and how they have developed ways to sell insurance to a population that might be unaware of the whole concept of insurance or to a younger population. And it's a lot of understanding where to place insurance, right? Like embedded insurance is also a big word in or a big trend in the US, but I feel in a lot of cases in Asia, it's done on a whole different level. To give you an example, in Indonesia, you have a ride-hailing company. You have Grab and Gojek, so it's like Uber or Lyft in the US. So what they have done, they have provided an embedded critical illness coverage for their drivers that they can pay by rides they are doing. So every ride they are doing, 10 cents or how much ever it is goes into a critical illness coverage. And that is directly connected. So even if they don't understand the concept of insurance, they know if they get seriously sick and they can't drive anymore, they won't have any income. So by connecting that and also solving that like payment problem, right? Because often they don't have bank accounts or, maybe they don't have the money to, finance that up front. So by combining that with the service they are providing and solving the payment issue, that makes it very intuitive, and a lot of people understand it, even, if they've never bought insurance before.
That's incredible. I love listening to you speak because you share so many amazing points all within like a great breadth. I'm trying to actually follow some of these nuggets. So bringing it back to like embedded insurance and how you actually present insurance. When you say that, do you mean from a marketing and advertising standpoint? Like how do you actually teach and help them understand and see, and then maybe see an advertisement? Okay. So when it comes to this, then it's really tying in, one, how are you going to pay for this in a manner that doesn't require upfront financing? Because in many poor countries, right, it's like, okay, if you can tie paying for this with the work you're already doing, okay, that's one way, that's one big hurdle to overcome. And then two, you talked about kind of that ignorance gap. When people just don't know and they haven't been taught, they just don't know the value. And so therefore tying it to like real life world experiences, which it's really simple, and the most profound things really are simple at the end of the day. It's bringing simple things together to prove a point and be convincing and to help people. How have you seen this impact the community, the culture? Maybe you even have a story of an individual that you've seen become impacted by learning about insurance, seeing the value, and then buying it and having it involved within their life, especially in a country outside of the US.
Yeah, I can't now think of an Asian example, but I came across a interesting company from Latin America. I think they're called Butterfly, and the founder tells the story about how he had some like tragedy in the family, like his father died, they had no
Right.
insurance, and they were struggling financially for a long, long time. And but that's also how they understood the importance of such products. So then they invested in insurance, and then his mom got sick, but this time they had insurance, and were able to recover from that, and get her the help she needed, and she survived the cancer. And that's also what inspired him to then start this own company. And I think there are a lot of these examples. I'm just thinking about another one in Asia. There's a really interesting company. It's at the intersection of insurance and healthcare. It's called DocDoc, and it's a platform that helps you find the best care. And this company started because the founders, Cole and Grace, who are actually both Americans, but living in Singapore, they had a daughter, and at I think it was a 3 months checkup after she was born, they found out that she needed a live liver transplant, something that has not really been done with a child that young. And the hospital in Singapore where they had the check, they immediately said, okay, we need to operate. We have the best doctors. It's going to be expensive, but we're going to take care of that. And these like young parents, they were like, okay, that's a really scary time. We want to trust these doctors, but we also want some more like transparency. Like, I know more about a car that I'm buying than about the doctor who is operating on my 3 months old baby, right?
Yeah.
And they had good contacts in the medical field, and they were able to track down the person who invented the procedure of like the live liver transplant, who was in Japan. And at the end got this person to, I believe he even flew to Singapore, perform the procedure, giving their girl the best care. And at the end, it was actually cheaper than what they were quoted initially by the hospital in Singapore, right?
Wow.
And that's when they then started DocDoc in order to give more transparency to the healthcare sector, right? And it's it's first about getting the best care, but also about costs would then translate to insurance, right? Because a lot of the healthcare costs occur from complications, and maybe these complications could have been avoided if there was a doctor who was more experienced in that field, etc. So yeah, that's another great example. Not exactly insurance, but still has an impact on
Do
insurance. And
you personally, sorry, keep going. I interrupted you.
no, I was just saying, I guess the moral of the story is
Hmm.
do something that has an impact on people and,
Yes.
makes people's lives easier. And that's I guess what most entrepreneurs are about.
Yeah. I That's why I'm in insurance. I told my family, I told my parents I would never do insurance. Insurance sucks. It's not fun. It's not glamorous. Everyone hates it. They're only going to hate you. But now that I've sold a lot of insurance. I've built insurance businesses. I've bought and sold those businesses and really sought to understand this industry, this product, this world-changing thing called insurance and what it does and how it impacts people. It brings a lot of purpose to what I do, because people don't know. They actually just think it's something that they have to pay for and they're obligated and they think it's a scam. Some of the most intelligent people in the world actually believe this too. There's so much emotion tied to this, and it baffles me actually. I had a client, an Asian client, who was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, to put this into perspective. And he had about 5 very exotic vehicles. He refused to insure them. Millions of dollars in value. He refused to insure them. At the end of the day, I only had insurance on his personal residence, and he got the minimum amount of coverage possible. And I explained to him the whole idea of saving money with the insurance company. You contribute, a few $1,000s a year for what is millions of dollars of coverage, which will last you a lifetime. And instead of just having cash in a savings account to replace whatever, gets broken, it doesn't make sense to keep all that cash in an account to save yourself when you could just buy into an insurance policy that is your safety net. Still, he just wouldn't do it. Have you found that, especially in educating people, because you've been a lecturer, you've taught, you've written books, you have really been a thought leader in this space? Why is it that people, even when they have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of money, etc., own things outright, their own cash and hard work is into the assets they have, still may or may not believe in insurance?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I keep getting the same question like you, right? Isn't it a scam? Or
Yeah.
something that I often hear from people, I keep paying for insurance, but I never get anything back.
Yeah.
And I think especially in today's world where everything is, about the individual and about, my gain and my advantage, insurance might be a bit difficult to understand. But, if you look back how insurance started, and I think the oldest insurance company is actually in Germany. It's the Hamburger Feuerkasse.
I did not know this. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the oldest insurance company that is still in existence. It's now part of a larger group. I just read this the other day when I did some research on actually parametric insurance, another interesting topic. Anyway, the reason why insurance started was at the beginning that people in a village would come together, and if someone's house would burn down, everybody would pitch in to help that person rebuild the house. And I guess nobody complained I just had to pay for, Rudi's house because Rudi, didn't take care and burned down his house. And I guess that community aspect and that aspect of, taking care of your community, of your, neighbors, etc. And I get it. It's when it's organized via a big insurance company that,
right.
is a major corporation, you are missing that part. And yeah, but if you think back of how insurance started and that idea that the community comes together to help those who had misfortune, right? And people understand that when I explain it like that mostly, but I guess it's just that these big insurance companies are often they lost the human touch to it.
They
And I guess
have.
it's
Yeah.
difficult if you are, a big organization. And that's why I think, agents and distributors are doing an important part in this,
Yes.
concept of, explaining that and having that like human component. But then we all know it. There are also, a lot of black sheets out there who are not
Hmm.
caring about what a person actually needs, but about the
Yeah.
commission. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so interesting. It sparks this thought and more like the thesis even around Luna Insurance and why I started Luna, because I really believe that we need to add value and create a far better user experience. And in doing so, through transparency of quoting, through availability to agents, through even the transparency of service requests, being able to know and have an estimated time of when that is going to get done. When's your agent going to get that thing done for you? It rebuilds trust. Because like you said, there've been a lot of bad players, and with large corporations being in insurance, obviously because of the amount of money that can be made by actually having all that cash flow, people don't understand insurance companies don't make money on the business of insurance. They pay out way more money in claims than they ever do collect in premium. In fact, to show a 1 or 2% profit on a year, which happens 2 or 3 times a decade for an insurance company, that's a huge win. They actually make money by playing the stock market and other investments with the cash flow that they receive, which we know this, but most people don't. Large companies, they've demonstratized insurance and they've commoditized insurance. So in other words, they're big, bad companies that have taken advantage of people, and they really have been bad players. And what they've also done is commoditize insurance, meaning they've made it only about price. All the commercials in the United States, it's all about price. What's happened, though, in doing so over the past however long, years, decades, they're losing money, they're losing market share. I'm noticing in the United States a huge shift in the demographic of the big three. You've got State Farm, Progressive, and Geico. Geico Insurance, for example, lost over 2% of market share this last year, and they moved away from an independent broker model. They moved away from an agency model, cut out the insurance agent. That, like you just said, is a huge value piece in humanizing this product. They lost a lot of market share. They're pivoting right back into now working with independent brokers and trying to get agents back in the office selling their product who can humanize it, explain it, relate, be personable, add value. State Farm, the largest player in the space, they don't sell insurance online. They do not have a web form that you can fill out and bind a policy quickly and get a cheap price. You have to work with a local insurance agent. And Progressive has always been super good at kind of doing both, giving you an online platform, which is really commoditizing it for quick, cheap rates. But they've worked with independent brokers, and independent brokers equate to over 30% of their annual revenue. So it's like, my point in all of this, do you ever see a time and place in our world in which we live now, and being that you have a global perspective, do you see a world in which we no longer have insurance agents, or do you see a world in which we actually have more?
Well, I think insurance agents won't go away. I think people will want to talk to a real person, especially when it comes to more complex products. And again, it really depends on the person and their preference. So I think
Sure.
the importance is to provide choice and to meet the customers where they want to be, meet at.
Yes.
I have
Yes.
realized myself, trying simple products like travel insurance in the US, just online because, I'm from the industry. I don't need an agent. I know exactly what I want. I found it so difficult to find it and to buy it online.
Yes.
And I actually had the same thing in Australia, which is shocking to me, right? But at the same time, if I, buy a more complex product, if I buy, health insurance or, maybe even with some like, property casualty products, it really depends. And I want to have this option to talk to a person. But that could also look quite different. Like another company I've featured in my book, which is operating in Japan. And Japan is actually a market that is very similar to the US. It's very mature. It's a very, advanced insurance market in that sense. And they have also created a mobile app, again, like mobile first approach, where they allow people to communicate via chat, have video calls, like, meet them where they are at. I think,
Sounds like
the
Luna
younger
for Japan.
generation is not interested anymore to have,
Yeah.
the insurance agent coming to, your house, sitting on the sofa, and,
Yeah.
it's maybe
Yeah.
not the way
Or
forward, but
emailing all the time or having to get on a
yeah.
long drawn out phone call. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yes, correct. So I think there will always be the need for a human component, especially for more complex products. But it might look different than in the past. It might be, texting, maybe video calling, more
Sure.
than, what it has been in the past of an agent coming to your house and,
Yeah.
holding you hostage in your own house sometimes
Holding you
until you
hostage to
sign the contract.
buy insurance until yeah. Man, that is so funny because even us in the space and we understand the good intentions of people realize what has happened and just the reality of the industry in general. Man, I have so many more questions. I want to keep going on this. I want to pivot back to you a little bit more, Theresa. I want you to, it's hard to get you to talk about yourself because you have so many accolades. You've done so many cool things, but just like my mother, who's a strong German woman, it's very difficult to get you to brag about yourself. So I'm going to brag about you a little bit, and then I want you to share about these business milestones. I want you to share about the risk, the fears, what it was like. So let's start with the book that you wrote. You've written multiple books now, have you not?
No, it's one book, but
Okay,
it's in
it's the
Brian
one.
Falchuk's The Future of Insurance series. So it's the first book in that
That's right.
series, but
Yes.
the only book I wrote in that.
So how did you get to the place of writing the fourth book in that series? Give us some insight into to how you got there. How did you do this for people that may be watching going, man, I want to write a book. I want to write a book about the space in which I work and believe. How did you get there? And what do you think is next?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I have toyed with the idea of writing a book for quite a while, and my business partner, Michael Waits, I'm doing the podcast with, he always
Right.
said, like, you should write a book. And because that's kind of what we do, right? We tell the stories, provide a platform for,
Yes.
to show cool players in the InsurTech space, innovative approaches, with the goal of helping the industry as a whole progress. But where do you start? Where do you start with a project like that? And then Brian Falchuk, who's American, we connected, I think through a conference or also through the podcast. Anyway, he started the Future of Insurance series, and he published the first book, which was on insurance incumbents in the US market. He then wrote a second one on startups in the insurance space, and both were, best-selling books in the insurance space. And people asked him if he could do something on a different market, and he didn't feel he had the experience to write something on Asia or on Europe. So he reached out to me and said, like, hey, would you be interested to publish a book in my series on the Asian market? And that was, I guess, what I was waiting for. And working with Brian has been, he's an amazing person.
That's incredible.
Really, really good to having him on this project. He read every chapter, and that was also good in a way, because I used a lot of phrases that are, English phrases, but doesn't make sense in the US context. I think one of the examples was I talked about small ticket insurance.
Yeah,
and
what is that?
He was like, what is that? And in my area, I think at least in Southeast Asia, everybody knows what that means. It's basically a micro insurance, like a small premium. So that could be, just insurance for, traveling, for example, or opting to
Renters
get insurance
would
for.
be a good example.
Yeah, but it's smaller premiums. It's more really low premiums of, like, a few dollars. Like, you're going on a hike and, you want to have protection just for that hike.
Wait, so you're telling me that there's insurance out there that exists at a micro level for people doing a one-day adventure?
Yes. And
I
there
had no
even there's
idea.
again, there's a company in Hong Kong, also in my book, called Yes, and they have invented this idea of you buy passes. You can buy like 10 tickets essentially. And when
Hmm.
you go on a hike, you activate it and you are covered for, that hike or for 24 hours. They're even playing around with
If
things
you
like,
break your leg,
GPS.
is it more like medical insurance? Okay.
Yes, and
Okay.
accident as well. They also have
Wow.
a partnership with a bus company, so you are insured if something happens to you on the bus, if you get, into an
Okay, that's
accident
brilliant.
there, or
Yeah.
you get robbed, for example, drop your phone, etc.
Oh my goodness, they're trying to protect against every single peril known to man. Have you seen anything like this come to fruition in the US? Are there any companies that are looking into micro insurance like that? I don't even know that there would be a market for it here for many reasons, but speak to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have not really seen that in the US, but again, I think it has also to do with the infrastructure and the culture. Like in Asia, everything is digitized and it's like digital platforms. So you have an app to, do this and do that.
Sure.
If you look at the super apps like WeChat or Line,
Hmm.
which is something that you don't find in the US, right? So, and there's a real opportunity to add an insurance component to that, right?
Hmm.
Another example with the ride hailing, for example, when you book the equivalent of an Uber to the airport, you get the option to add like a coverage in case you get stuck in traffic and you miss your
Hmm.
flight. So, you get a new flight, like these type of,
Hmm.
and that's another example for a small ticket insurance, right? It's just for this
Yeah.
like one event. um, but it's also a means to reach the younger generation and teach them about insurance, right? Because if you have a
Hmm.
20 something year old who is probably
Hmm.
not too worried about their health, about getting into an accident, etc., but they are worried about you know breaking their phone, they're worried about missing their flight that they saved for and are looking forward to. And in some of the major
Sure.
cities like Bangkok or Indonesia, when it starts raining, there's a real chance that you get stuck and you
Ah,
are not going
that's
anywhere and you're
very
going to miss
true.
your flight.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very real
So
world scenario.
yeah, and these concept, and we just experienced that here as well.
Yeah.
That was when Brian was able to say like, "Hey, nobody in the US will understand that. You have to explain that for people to
Yeah.
understand it." So
Hmm.
that's also why I'm really grateful to Brian, because he
Hmm.
helped make this book accessible, whether you have been in Asia or you've never been in Asia before, because you
Wow.
will understand it.
Hmm.
And understand what's the purpose behind it, why it's important. So yeah, it was couldn't have wished for a better person to publish that
That's
book.
great.
And yeah, it was a number one bestseller as well.
And how long ago? The book just recently came out, no?
Well, it's almost a year. It came out in
Okay.
October.
Came out a year ago? Okay. How many speaking engagements have you done in total throughout your lifetime now as a professional?
That's a good question. And also, what do you count as a speaking engagement?
Well, I will let you determine the importance of them.
I mean, I have spoken at all major conferences. I would say I've spoken at
Right.
ITC. I've spoken at InsurTech Insights, Insurance Innovators.
Hmm.
In Asia, there's also the Asia Insurance Review, which is a
Hmm.
magazine which also hosts events. I've spoken at the Singapore FinTech Festival,
Hmm.
at the Hong Kong FinTech Festival. I've spoken at an InsurTech Exec in Germany. Others, it's really hard to keep track, especially the COVID years are a bit blurry, where you are
Right.
speaking at a different event almost every week in a different country, but you're still
Yeah.
sitting at home, not seeing any other people in person. Then I've also done presentations for companies. So
Hmm.
companies hire me to present on
Hmm.
certain topics. I have lectured at the Singapore College of Insurance
That's great.
on topics of like big data and innovation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's incredible. No, I love your experience. With that being said, talk to us about some risk-taking moments, moments in which you took a leap of faith. I know that we've personally talked about when you launched your podcast in the United States, there were some reservations, and I'd like you to speak a little bit about that, maybe be a little vulnerable in terms of how you felt during that process.
Every time you put yourself out there, it's scary, right? When we first started the Asia InsurTech podcast, and I mentioned that earlier, we didn't know if people in Asia and in the insurance industry would, listen to it. Then when we launched last year, InsurTech Amplified, like the global show with the, focus on the US, there are already so many, amazing podcasts in this space, especially in the US. But I think, we do things a little bit differently than others maybe. And we already had a large fan base from the Asia InsurTech podcast, because funny enough, our third largest market for the Asia InsurTech podcast is actually the US. So number one is India, then it's Singapore, and then it's the US. Because I think people do pay attention, and for all the reasons I mentioned, right? Like the leapfrogging of certain development stages, the high digitization in a lot of Asian countries. So but every time it is scary, like putting that book out, and having now people to give you star ratings and rate the quality of your book. It is scary, and there will always be people that criticize it for maybe good, maybe not so good reasons. But I think it doesn't matter. For me, it matters that I do something that I believe in, that I'm passionate about, that brings me motivation. And I'm always open to criticism, but I stopped taking criticism from people who have not done what I have done. And I don't know if you know the quote from Theodore Roosevelt, the man in the arena. It's about, if you have not been in the arena, and if you have not poured your, sweat and blood into a project, and, understand what it means, you have, no right to criticize it, essentially. And, it is every time scary, but if I believe in something, and if I think it adds value in whatever shape or form that is, then I go for it.
That's amazing. Do you have children? I'm curious.
No, I don't have children.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this question.
I move way too often.
I move way too often. Yeah. No, I think I knew that, but I'm curious though, because you're a woman of character. You're also very mentally tough, and you're also extremely educated, and you add a lot of value to your community. You also understand insurance. You understand the community aspect. When you are 85 years old, and say you had grandchildren, or you have children and you have grandchildren, or maybe just envision a small child, a small girl from Germany, that's maybe 8, 9, or 10 years old, and you're 85, and you're nearing the end of your life, what would you want that little girl to have learned from you or say about you?
No, and it's good that you picked a girl, right? Because that's something I'm quite passionate about. Empowering women and empowering the next generation of women, because that is something that I have experienced. Some of the conferences I've been speaking at, before I was on stage, people saw me and they thought, oh, it's probably the PA, or it was widely ignored, because people thought I have nothing to share, nothing to say. And only after, and that's also one of the reasons why I've done so many public speaking engagements, and putting myself out there, because I have to, because people look at me and they don't think thought leader in insurance innovation, and that is largely because there are so few women in this space. So what I want to create is visibility, because if I can see it, I can be it. So that's what I hope to, pass on to the next generation, that they see people like me, on stage writing books. I'm the first woman in the InsurTech space that wrote an entire book. There are, people like Sabine van der Linden, who's also doing an amazing job.
Right.
She has, contributed chapters to books, but I'm really the first woman in this space to
Yes.
publish a book on InsurTech and insurance innovation.
Yeah.
And one reason I do that is also to normalize that people who look like me are in this space and have something to say. So hopefully
Right.
the next generation has it a bit easier.
That's incredible, because we need more contribution. We need more people who care deeply about other people to be in the space of insurance. That was the reason why it was designed, as you just noted, which that was a profound revelation of where insurance started. I'm shocked that I never even asked that question of myself and Googled it or something. That's incredible. What about you? What do you do in terms of like personal growth? What do you do to stay sharp? What do you do to continually be healthy and maintain a high level and always be contributing? How do you live your life in that sense in order to stay at a high level?
Well, I think it's important to talk to people, and people from like different backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
Because often it's not that someone is not educated or not smart enough to understand something. It's just because they haven't viewed something from a different perspective.
Right. Yeah.
So we are all brought up in a certain way, and these experiences shape how we see the world. And
Yes.
by talking to other people who might not come from the insurance industry, who might come from a different socioeconomic background, different culture, etc. So this is where I really get a lot of ideas from, new things, to think about things differently. And that's also why I believe diversity is so important in the workplace. And one reason why the insurance industry is often, a bit backward and lagging innovation is that there's not enough diversity. Like I worked 10 years
Truly.
for
Yeah.
Generali, and my boss, who later became the CEO, he spent his entire career working for the same company. And that's great that there are these careers, but at the same time,
It's rare these days.
It's also quite limited on perspective. And I think that's also what InsurTech has helped, getting more people from outside the industry, more diversity into the insurance industry, because that is what brings the industry as a whole forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's innovation, it's disruption. That's truly where I find my purpose in building Luna, because this is not easy. It's not easy, and you have a lot of critics, and you wonder if it's going to work. You wonder if people will listen. You wonder a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, you have to be driven by purpose, far more than possession, making money, or even like being notable. I think you have to be driven by a deep purpose. And when people have it, you can see it, you can hear it, and I hear that from you, which is why it's so encouraging, honestly. Like, you're very encouraging to me every time we've spoken, and especially now, throughout this conversation, I'm further motivated to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to be like a Theresa. So I might be that 12-year-old boy that's excited about the prospects of actually being in an industry that changes things in this world. So thank you. I appreciate that. What are your future goals? We'll end with this. What are Theresa's future goals? Where does Theresa want to go? Where do you and your husband see yourselves? You're in New York now. Maybe you move somewhere else, but talk to me about the vision you have for the next 10, 20, 30 years of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been living in New York now for 1.5 years, and it's been a long time since I lived in one spot in one country for that long. Now we are at some point we are going back to Australia, and then let's see what's next. What I'm personally excited about, or wanting to focus more on, is better understanding. Like, we have a lot of innovation, you have a lot of new technologies, but what is the impact, and how do we need to shape regulation policy, but also organizations to make the best out of these opportunities, and minimizes the risks. So for one example, we have now AI in almost everything, and coming from women's perspective again, we have worked really hard on trying to eliminate biases. And now with a lot of AI being used in hiring and other decision-making processes, there's a real risk of getting these biases back, and having even a bigger
programmed
issue.
Having it programmed into decision making. Yes, that's true.
So how can we ensure that we use the opportunities that these technologies bring, but also understand the risks, and again, about managing risks. So I'm staying true to the insurance theme, I guess.
I love it. Did you hint at getting into politics? Is that what I heard? You want to get into politics?
Yeah, I'm considering it, right? So my journey, I was first at an insurance company. I saw all the things that can be optimized. I switched to management consulting, and there's only a certain amount you can do there.
Right.
And I think in policy and politics, there's a huge need for people who understand the business side, who understand, what new technologies, what's their impact, and then also what is needed, right?
Yeah.
Also, one of the reasons why, one reason why insurance is often also a bit behind in adopting new technologies, it's because it's so highly regulated. And I've worked with regulators across Asia, and a lot of times it is also because you have a culture that is really risk averse at that level, and also people who have to catch up on understanding how these new technologies work. And I feel like that's maybe the next progression in my journey.
That's incredible. I'm excited. I would vote for you.
I don't know if I'm going to be, elected politician. That's not what I'm. But
no, I know. I joke.
Think tanks, policy decision. I think there is a real need for people who understand the business side, but also, the impact of things like AI, etc.
Sure. I mean, corporations and people at certain levels are far removed from the day-to-day workings in business that is transacted, which is ultimately what you are making decisions for, the user who needs something and the product that is being provided or the service. There's also distributors, salespeople, and others that are involved in this process. And many times people have done it once before, or shockingly enough, they never have. And they have zero perspective. And they climb a ladder to power or into authority, and and making more money and being more impactful. And they just have been too far removed from reminding themselves of what is the problem we're trying to solve. So I'm with you. Again, that's another reason why I love your insight, because as high of a ladder as you've climbed, and in the different rooms in which you've been in, and the impact you've had globally now, you still remember, we're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to help people, and insurance is important. So let's do a good job at that. It's not just about trying to make good money. So with that being said, Theresa, thank you so much for spending the time today. It's really been a pleasure. Cam and I are gonna be back in New York in a few weeks. I'm actually speaking at a couple different events and pitching Luna to some more venture capital and connecting with some good people. One of those people, hopefully being you and your husband. So we'll try to spend some time together. And again, thank you so much for being on this episode with us. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.